He thought forcing his pregnant ex-girlfriend to sing at his wedding would be the ultimate humiliation. Amar stepped onto the stage, one hand on her belly. Her gaze swept across the wealthy guests, all waiting for a satisfying spectacle. The music started. She began to sing. But instead of the song he requested, she stopped midway. "Before I sing, I have something to say." Grayson raised an eyebrow. The bride gripped his hand tightly. Amara looked straight at them, her voice calm, steady. "Grayson Hale, you once called me a gold digger, but your daughter, Nia, is sitting out there. And my son, Malik, is the reason I'm still standing." The room fell silent. The bride stepped back. Grayson turned pale. "And Amara?" She smiled, not out of anger, not out of pain, just closure. 15 years ago, the Bronx winter was colder than usual. Amara Bennett, 22, stood in a rundown bathroom, gripping her 5th pregnancy test, 2 red lines. She collapsed onto the bed. The dim light in the weakly rented room barely offered warmth. Outside, snow fell thick. She checked the clock. 7 p.m. Grayson could arrive at any moment. They had been in love for almost a year. He was a regular at the boutique where she worked. Successful, charming, wealthy. He said he loved her simplicity, loved how she smiled even when she had nothing. She believed him. Amara adjusted her hair, put on light makeup. Her eyes were slightly swollen from exhaustion. A knock on the door. She took a deep breath and opened it. Grayson entered, carrying the scent of expensive cologne in the cold. "I have something to tell you," she began. "You're going to be a father. Twins." Grayson stood still. Said nothing. Amara waited for a reaction, a hug, a smile, but he let out a quiet chuckle, then pulled out his phone. "We need to talk," he said, eyes cold. He sat down and took out an envelope. "There's $5,000 in here. Enough for you to take care of it." Amara blinked. "Take care of it? You're not serious, are you?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "I'm not signing anything. I'm not responsible." "That's your child, Grayson." "Are you sure?" She went numb. He stood, adjusted his coat. "Don't destroy my future over one mistake." Then he walked out, the door shut. He didn't look back once. Amara held her belly. Alone in the snow in silence. The next morning, Amara returned to the boutique as usual. She needed to work. To keep things normal, but her time card didn't work. The manager avoided her eyes. "We received instructions from above," he whispered. "You no longer fit the brand image." She called Grayson. No answer. Emailed him. Bounced back. In just 3 days, Amara lost her job in her room. She hadn't yet paid rent. She slept in the train station, arms wrapped around her belly, listening to the heartbeats of 2 unborn children. No family, no friends. A muddy flyer she picked up in the park read, "Soup Kitchen, open 6 p.m. 6 p.m. That night, Amara walked into a small diner at the end of the block. It was the first time she met Lydia Morales. Lydia looked Amara up and down. Messy hair, thin jacket, tired eyes. "Have you eaten?" Amara nodded, but her stomach growled. "Come in. I need someone temporary." Amara was put on dishwashing. The cold water stung her hands, but she didn't complain. Lydia handed her a hot bowl of soup. "Eat. Come back tomorrow if you want." Amara bowed her head in thanks. That night, Lydia let her sleep in the storage room. An old mattress, a clean blanket. Amara lay on her side, hand on her belly, 2 tiny heartbeats still strong. "Hold on," she whispered. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept peacefully. Not because everything was okay, but because for once someone saw her without pity. Amara kept working every night. Cleaning tables, scrubbing floors, washing dishes with cracked hands. Lydia never asked much. But each evening she left a warm meal for her. Amara's belly grew. She moved slower, but never stopped. Customers began to recognize her. Some left small tips. Some looked at her with sympathy. One evening Lydia asked gently, "What will you do when the babies come?" Amara shook her head. "I don't know, but I won't give them up." Lydia nodded silently. 3 days later, a sharp pain struck while Amara was wiping tables. Lydia called a taxi and rushed her to the hospital. "It's too late," the nurse said. In a hallway full of white lights and screams, Amara gripped Lydia's hand. 2 cries rang out, almost in unison. A boy. A girl. Amara held the babies in her arms. Red, trembling, small as fists. The nurse asked, "What are their names?" She looked at the boy, eyes shut tight, fingers gripping her shirt. "Malik," she whispered, "because you're my strength." Then at the girl, calm, wide-eyed, already observing the world. "Naya," she smiled, "because you're my reason." They did not carry the Hale name. She made that decision when signing the birth certificates. She was a single mother, no insurance, no support, but her hand didn't shake. Lydia sat beside her, quietly placing a hand on her shoulder. They have a mother. That's enough to begin. And in that moment, Amara knew she could no longer afford to fall. Amara returned to the diner a week later. Lydia had rearranged the storage room into a tiny corner for the three of them. A thin curtain for privacy, a foldable bed, an old crib. Nia slept soundly. Malik fussed when the lights were on. By day, Amara washed diapers and cooked porridge. By night, she worked, stealing moments of sleep between shifts. Some nights, all three slept on the floor, wrapped in a thick church-donated blanket Lydia had brought. She didn't have much, but she had enough to live. Under the kitchen light, she wrote in an old notebook, planned to study for G-U-Bu, E. Each page, a step. No one thought a girl who just had twins living behind a diner could dare to dream, but Amara did. When Nia and Malik slept, Amara opened her books. Yellow light from the kitchen fell onto the metal table. She read pages of an old math book, taking notes with a nearly dried-out pen. Lydia quietly set a hot cup of tea beside her. "Don't stay up too late," she said, then left. Amara smiled, eyes still on the page. She studied fraction division between diaper changes, memorized chemical formulas while rocking Malik to sleep, learned English vocabulary while washing dishes, a little more each day. One time, a customer heard her read a section of the French menu fluently. "Where did you study?" Amara replied, "Where no one expected me to." And every night as the city slept, she kept learning how to rise. One Saturday night, the diner hosted a small music night. A guitarist canceled last minute. Lydia looked around, then called Amara. "You said you could sing, right?" Amara shook her head, but Lydia handed her the mic anyway. Her hands trembled as she stepped onto the makeshift stage. Naya and Malik were sleeping in the back. She thought of her children, of the lullabies she sang to them. The music began. She closed her eyes and started. Her voice, deep, emotional, imperfect, touched something in the room. The diner went silent. The first 10 seconds, she only heard her heartbeat. The next 10, applause. A customer approached. "Ever thought about performing for real?" Amara didn't answer right away, but for the first time her eyes held something new, belief. That evening, after the last guest had left, Lydia found Amara sitting silently in the kitchen, her gaze far away. "Was that man serious?" Lydia asked. Amara nodded. "He owns a little acoustic cafe. Invited me to try performing." "Are you going?" Amara looked down at her hands, calloused, weary. "I have 2 kids. I'm studying again. What dreams do I have left to chase?" Lydia sat beside her. "You have a voice, you have strength, and you have me." Amara said nothing. That night, as she sang softly to lull Nia to sleep, Malik stopped crying and dozed off. She looked at her children, then up at the ceiling. If there was a chance to step into the light, she would take it. Not just for herself, but for the 2 small lives that needed to see their mother be brave. A week later, Amara stood backstage at a small cafe in the Lower East Side. Soft golden lights. Not a large crowd, but enough to make her heart race. The manager nodded. Time. Amara stepped forward. She wore a borrowed dress from Lydia, hair tied back, no makeup, but her eyes were steady. She chose an old soul song, not to impress, but because it was the one she sang to her children every night when the world turned its back. The music played. Her voice was warm, slow, not polished, but so honest that the room went still. When the song ended, there was a short silence. Then applause erupted. A man in the front row turned to her. "What's your name?" "Amara Bennett," she replied. "I'm a mother, and I sing." After the show, the man approached. Modestly dressed, but his eyes were sharp. "I'm Elias Carter," he said. "I manage a chain of small music lounges. We're looking for a recurring female voice." Amara stepped back slightly. "I'm not a professional singer. You have something that can't be taught, real feeling." He handed her a card. "Audition at Indigo Lounge next week. No strings." Amara took the card, her heart in a whirl. She left quickly, neither accepting nor refusing. That night she sat by Nia and Malik's bed, watching them sleep. Lydia came in. "He invited you to perform, didn't he?" Amara nodded. "But I'm scared." Lydia replied softly but firmly. "Fear isn't a reason to turn down opportunity, especially when you've already had nothing left to lose." A week later, Amara arrived at Indigo Lounge. Not as a guest, but as an auditioning artist. No big stage, no colored lights, just a mic, a piano, and Elias's expectant eyes. She sang a sad ballad, A story of a nameless, homeless single mother who never gave up. Elias said nothing throughout the song. When she finished the last note, he said only one thing. "You've got a gig every Friday, $300 per show." Amara froze. In her mind, she calculated. Formula, diapers, savings. She nodded. No hesitation. On the bus ride home, she cried quietly, trying not to disturb the other passengers. For the first time, her voice was not just a way to survive, it was work. On her first Friday at Indigo Lounge, Amara wore a simple black dress Lydia had adjusted the night before. She stepped onto the stage, eyes scanning unfamiliar faces. No more fear, just heartbeat and melody. She sang about hope. About a mother standing in the darkness, seeing light in the smallest things. The audience listened closely. An older woman wiped away tears. A young couple held hands tighter. When the performance ended, Elias just nodded. "Better than your first." She got off the bus at midnight, shoes worn thin. Back at the diner, Lydia was waiting, with a hot cup of ginger tea. "You sing for the kids," Lydia said, "and now those kids have a mother who knows where she's going." Amara smiled, this time genuinely. Week after week, Amara performed every Friday night. Indigo Lounge became the place that sustained the three of them. She didn't need to ask anyone for help, didn't have to bow her head before pity. In the mornings, she studied for the GED using books from the library. At noon, she played with Nia and Malik in a small park behind the diner. At night, she changed dresses and went to sing. Regulars began to know her name. Some came just to hear Amara's song. One evening, Elias asked, "Have you ever thought about recording?" She shook her head. "I never thought my voice could, live somewhere permanent." "Some voices aren't meant to be famous," Elias said. "They're meant to heal." Amara didn't respond, but that night as she sang, her voice went deeper. Like speaking to the version of herself from a year ago, thin, soaked in snow with no one to call her name. One autumn morning, Amara received a letter. She had passed the GED, a small piece of paper, but it meant a lifetime. Lydia hugged her tightly, eyes glistening. "I knew it." Amara sat beside her children as they played, her heart restless. She could keep singing, but now she wanted more. She wanted to build a future with foundation, not just feelings. A stable job, a small home, a decent school for Nia and Malik. She researched courses in event planning. Every night after singing, she sat at the corner of the lounge, learning how to build budgets, timelines, and manage staff. Eliza saw her working late and asked, "Planning something big again?" Amara smiled faintly. "This time, it's for them." 3 months later, Amara applied for an unpaid internship at a local event company. Her schedule was intense. Internship during the day, childcare in the evening, singing at night. She brought Nia and Malik to the office when no sitter was available. Some employees complained, but she remained polite, punctual, and patient. Once the boss forgot to order a wedding cake. Amara quickly called a local vendor she knew. The event went off without a hitch. After that, she was offered an official assistant position, with salary, contract, and insurance. Amara signed the papers with trembling hands. Not from fear, but from joy. That night on stage, she sang slower than usual, not out of fatigue, but because every word suddenly felt too real. Amara moved out of the diner's storage room. She rented a tiny studio in Brooklyn, just enough for a bed, a twin crib, and a small kitchen. But it was hers. Lydia helped her move. Elias brought an old reading lamp. "So you can plan with better lighting," he said. Every morning, Nia and Malik sat by the window watching traffic while Amara prepared event portfolios. She started taking small freelance gigs on weekends, birthdays, small weddings, restaurant openings. After each event, she wrote in her notebook, "One step closer." She no longer just dreamed of escaping poverty. Now she dreamed of building something lasting. For her children, for herself, and for the women who'd once been underestimated like her. One late evening, as Amara left Indigo Lounge, rain poured suddenly. She pulled her coat over her head and rushed toward the bus stop. Through the downpour, a luxury car pulled over. The window rolled down. "Grayson." He looked at her a second longer than necessary. "Amara?" She stood still, not surprised, not shaken. "You doing okay?" he asked, voice tinged with hesitation. She gave a small nod. "I'm fine, and so are the kids." He was silent and then said, I want to see them." She looked at him for a long moment. "They lack nothing, and they have their mother." She turned and walked into the rain. Grayson didn't call after her. Amara didn't cry. That rain years ago had broken her, but tonight it only made her walk faster. 3 weeks after that rainy night, Amara received an email from the legal department. Grayson had requested a paternity test. She wasn't surprised. She quietly hit forward and sent it to the community lawyer Lydia had recommended. One afternoon, as she was taking Malik and Nia to the library, she saw Grayson standing across the street. He didn't approach, didn't call out. She held the kid's hands tighter and kept walking. He stood still, as if waiting for something that would never come. That night, Amara sat by the window watching the city lights. She wasn't afraid of Grayson anymore, not because he had gotten weaker, but because she had changed. The woman once abandoned in the snow was now drafting an event plan for a financial corporation, and in that plan there was no space for the past. Amara walked into the meeting room on the 20th floor of a glass tower in Manhattan. A perfectly tailored gray suit, hair neatly tied, eyes sharp. Across from her sat representatives from a rising investment firm. They needed a planner for a series of launch events. She presented her ideas, theme, budget, guest experience, no hesitation, no apology for being a single mom. When the meeting ended, the partner stood and shook her hand. "We're choosing you, because you know how to tell a story through experience." Amara nodded and stepped into the hallway. She texted Lydia, "First win, not the last." On her way home, Naya called via video, "Mom, today I drew you standing on a stage." Amara looked at the screen. Her smile was as soft as morning light. That evening, Amara didn't perform at Indigo Lounge. She sat in the audience for the first time, just listening. Elias saw her and gave a small nod instead of asking. A young singer stepped onto the stage, trembling under the lights. Amara saw her past self, clutching the mic, heart pounding, eyes searching for someone who believed in her. The song began, raw, unpolished, but true. When the performance ended, Amara was the first to clap. Elias, sitting beside her, whispered, "You don't need this stage anymore, but maybe this place still needs you." Amara said nothing. A week later, she proposed a free weekend class for women to learn singing and public speaking. Elias nodded. "I'll handle the space. You handle the inspiration." On the first Sunday, 6 women sat in a small back room of Indigo Lounge. One was a cashier, another had dropped out of school. All of them shared one thing: fear of using their voice. Amara stood before them, no mic, no just honest eyes and a warm, steady voice. "You don't need to sing beautifully, just speak your truth." One woman timidly sang a lullaby. Another shared a passage she had once written but never read aloud. Amara didn't correct. She listened, nodded. "That's music," she said. "Courage spoken straight from the heart." By the end, they stayed longer than expected. One asked, "Will there be class next week?" Amara smiled. "As long as you keep showing up, I'll keep teaching." One morning, Amara received a call from a local radio station. The host invited her to join a talk show called Voice of the City, highlighting women who overcame hardship and created positive change. She hesitated. "I'm not a celebrity," Amara told Lydia. "But you're real," Lydia replied, "and that's what people need to hear." That evening, she jotted down notes in her journal. Childhood, losing her home, the twins, her first time holding a mic. The interview was taped in a small studio with soft lighting. When the mic turned on, the host asked, "If you could say one thing to the woman who was abandoned 15 years ago, what would it be?" Amara looked straight into the camera. "I'd say, you didn't fall, and because of that, we're here now." After the broadcast, Amara's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from strangers. "I heard your story. I once slept in a car with my child, too." A young woman wrote, "For the first time, I believe I can stand up without needing revenge." Lydia printed out every message and pinned them to a board in the diner's kitchen. Those who heard Amara. Elias suggested expanding the class into a permanent program, Voice and Vision, where women could learn to speak, sing, and write their own stories. Amara hadn't expected such a brief appearance to reach so many. She still managed events, still sang, still rocked her children to sleep each night, but now every time she raised her voice, she knew someone out there was waiting to believe in themselves because of her story. At a women entrepreneur conference held in a city convention center, Amara attended as a guest. She stood among hundreds in tailored suits, each introduced by their degrees and titles. When it was her turn, the coordinator announced, "Amara Bennett, founder of Voice and Vision, community experience strategist." The hall applauded, not because she was famous, but because her name now stood for something real, rebirth. An older woman came up. "My daughter is in your class. She sang to me for the first time in 10 years. Amara simply nodded, gently. In her heart, she thought of the snowy night long ago, the cheap rented room and that cold $5,000 envelope. Now her voice had a value, not for sale, but to be passed on. One late night, as Amara was preparing lesson plans for the weekend class, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know you don't need anything from me, but I need to talk. Grayson. She stared at the screen for a long time, didn't reply. An hour later, another message. I lost the company, they pulled out. I have nothing left. Amara turned off the phone and set it on the table. She brewed tea and walked into the room. Nia and Malik were already asleep. She lay beside them and closed her eyes. The past was knocking, but this time she wouldn't answer, not out of anger, but because she had found peace without needing explanations. The next morning she deleted the messages. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about dialogue. It's about no longer letting it take up space in your mind. A news article went viral. Grayson Hale, from Millionaire CEO to scandal-ridden bankruptcy lawsuit. Amara skimmed it, felt nothing. The man who once called her a burden was now caught in fraud allegations, his reputation ruined, his accounts frozen. Lydia laid the paper on the kitchen table but said nothing. I'm not happy, Amara said quietly. Just hollow. Because you've moved far from that place, so Lydia replied. So far that looking back only makes you grateful you're not there anymore. That night, while singing at Indigo Lounge, Amara chose a song with no bitterness, no blame, only one final line. I don't need you to fall, I just need to stand tall. The room went silent. Then came the applause, long, steady. After the performance, Elias waited backstage holding 2 cups of tea. Your voice sounded different tonight, he said. Amara smiled. I'm no longer singing to prove anything. Then who are you singing for now? She looked around the room. The women who once feared being seen now harmonizing backstage. The audience, still and quiet, afraid even to breathe too loud. For those who haven't yet believed they deserve to be heard. Elias nodded. After a pause, he said, Amara, if you ever think about building a real place, for the class, for a stage, for that community, I want to be your first investor. She didn't answer right away, but inside she knew a new chapter was beginning, and this time she wouldn't be writing it alone. One Saturday morning, Amara sat in Lydia's old diner and spread a sandwich wrapper across the table. She drew a layout with a ballpoint pen, a small stage, a multi-purpose studio, a play corner for kids, a tea bar, and a quiet space for writing. Lydia looked at the sketch, eyes misty. What will this place be called? Amara paused, then wrote at the top, The Voice House. Elias arrived and placed a draft investment agreement in front of her. Startup funding, no management she could control. I believe in the way you build community, he said. No gimmicks, just honesty. Amara nodded. We're not opening a center, we're opening a door. Outside, Nia and Malik were drawing with sidewalk chalk. She looked at them and then back at the sketch. And she knew she was building a real home. An old house in Harlem was chosen as the starting point for the Voice House. Peeling paint, warped wood floors, but high ceilings and beautiful light. Amara stood in the empty room imagining every corner, a space for someone to speak for the first time, an old piano by the window, bookshelves for stories never told. Lydia brought a big pot of soup to feed the volunteers cleaning up. Elias came with paint, rollers, and a jazz playlist. Malik helped wipe down dust. Nia labeled everyone's paper cups. In the afternoon, Amara painted the first wall in black. This place doesn't need you to be perfect, just real. The first brick was laid, not just for a house, but for a legacy. On the opening day of the Voice House, the sun was soft. No red ribbons, no media. Just a small group seated on folding chairs, holding black and white printed programs. Amara stepped out. No microphone, no elevated stage. She stood among them where everyone could meet her eyes. We're not here to be famous, she began. We're here to hear one another. She invited an older woman to share her story of returning to work after divorce. A young girl read a poem about her late father. No polite laughter, no courtesy clapping, just real silence when someone says something true. At the end, a woman approached. I don't know how to sing. I've just been silent too long. Can I be here? Amara smiled. This place was made for you. One late afternoon, while Amara was arranging books at the Voice House, the door opened. Grayson walked in. No suit, no arrogance, just a man standing in a room that no longer belonged to his world. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said, eyes avoiding hers. I just wanted to hear your voice again, not online. Here. Amara set the book down. You once said my voice was a nuisance, and now you say it's what you need to hear. Grayson stayed silent. You had the chance to be here, to be a father. and you chose nothing." She didn't ask him to leave. She simply turned and walked into the back room. Grayson lingered a moment, then left. The doorbell chimed softly and closed. No one looked back. That night, Amara stood on the small wooden platform of the voice house, a warm glow from a table lamp beside her. No microphone, no speakers. She shared a story, not about pain, but about surviving without letting the past define her. "Some apologies never come," she said, "and they don't need to." Naya and Malik sat in the front row, silently listening to their mother speak. Afterward, a young woman approached, eyes red. "I used to fear speaking, afraid no one would listen. But today, I think I'll start." Amara took her hand, held it tight. "If you speak for the right reason, even if no one hears it, it's still worth it." The girl nodded, then stepped onto the platform. Her voice trembled, but her feet stood firm. One Monday morning, Amara received an invitation from a national organization. She'd been nominated for Community Impact Woman of the Year. She sat quietly with the letter, not because of the recognition, but because the award ceremony would be held at Midtown Plaza, the building where Grayson was once CEO. Lydia read the letter, paused, then asked, "Are you afraid to go back there?" Amara shook her head. "Not anymore." The truth was she no longer wanted to hide. Not from memories, not from a name that once made her feel small. That evening in her voice and vision class, she shared, "I used to think I had to run from the places that hurt me. Now I understand. I just need to walk into them as someone new." And this time she would walk in, not to confront, but to rise above. Midtown Plaza shimmered with lights. Amara walked into the grand hall, once Grayson's domain, once the place that erased and rejected her. But today her name tag read, Amara Bennett, founder of the Voice House. She didn't come alone. Lydia sat front row. Elias walked beside her. Nia and Malik dressed neatly, eyes sparkling. The host announced her name to applause, a woman who turned silence into a space for voices. Amara stepped onto the stage. She didn't look around to find anyone. She didn't need validation, didn't need to prove anything. She spoke one line, "I was once muted in my own life. Now I stand here to tell anyone who's ever felt the same. Your voice is still here, and always worth using." After the ceremony, a photographer sent Amara a picture. Her on stage, soft light glowing, holding a glass award, face calm. She printed it, framed it, and hung it on the main wall of the Voice House. Beneath it, she wrote in silver ink, "Not the pinnacle, just a place I once thought I'd never reach." The students looked at it, each seeing a part of themselves reflected there. One afternoon, Malik asked, "Mom, do you think you look beautiful in that photo?" Amara paused, then answered, "I think I look real." Lydia, standing behind, placed a hand on her shoulder. "And you make others see themselves as real, too." It wasn't a photo of victory. It was a photo of someone who once couldn't face the mirror, now daring to stand before the world. One morning, Amara received an envelope with no sender. Inside, a letter in a familiar handwriting. It was from Grayson's mother. "Amara, I don't know if I have the right to write to you, but I want to thank you for keeping your heart and raising 2 children with the love my son didn't have the courage to give." She shared that she had visited the Voice House, sat quietly in the back one Sunday, and cried as she listened to a stranger tell a story that sounded just like her grandchildren's. At the end, she wrote, "If one day Nia and Malik wish to know about their grandparents, I hope they won't be afraid to knock." Amara folded the letter. She didn't cry. She tucked it into a drawer, not to forget, but to keep for the right moment. One evening during Voice and Vision Weekend Open Mic, Amara stood backstage watching 2 small figures step up. Nia wore a blue dress. Malik had a crooked red bow tie. Their hands were tightly clasped. "I want to tell a story about our mom," Nia began. Her voice was soft but clear. "Back then, Mom didn't have a home," Malik continued, "but she still sang to us every night, no matter where we were." Then they sang a short lullaby, the one Amara used to sing over the sound of subways and rain, cradling them in a thin blanket. The room was silent. Amara covered her mouth, tears spilling without her noticing, not out of pride, but because for the first time she heard her own echo, not from the past, but from the future now finding its voice. At a community leadership summit, Amara was invited as a keynote speaker. The topic, turning loss into value. She stepped onto the stage before expectant faces, and in the last row, a familiar gaze quietly emerged. Grayson. Amara saw him. She didn't look away. She began, I used to think success meant revenge, but really it's a quiet declaration that I kept living. And lived right. The room fell silent. No one knew that the man at the back had once been the first crack in that story. After the talk, Grayson remained seated, not approaching. Amara walked past him and gently said, "You are no longer the reason, and I don't need forgiveness to be free." She walked away without looking back. The following week, Amara completed a grant application to an international foundation. The project, the Voice House 2, where voices are sown again. Proposed location: an old church in New Jersey, home to many immigrant women living in silence. Elias handled financials. Lydia helped connect with local charities. Malik asked, "Why are you opening another one, Mom?" Amara knelt beside him. "Because there are many women like I once was, and I want them to speak before they reach their breaking point." Naya added, "Then I'll draw the sign again, like last time." Amara hugged them both. This time the journey didn't begin in pain. It began in fullness, ready to be shared. Amara was invited onto a national television program themed Voices from the Unexpected. The country tuned in. As the host asked, "Have you ever thought about forgiving the one who turned their back on you?" Amara paused, then answered, soft but clear, "I don't wait for a regret. I choose to live. And that's enough to lighten my heart." Applause filled the studio. After the broadcast, hundreds of women wrote to the Voice House, some from prisons, others from shelters, many who had never dared to speak their truth. Amara read every word. She couldn't reply to them all. But in every class, every open mic after that, she spoke for them, not with weeping, but with rising. At a community fundraiser, Amara was presented with a symbolic check for $250,000 to expand the Voice House. No fireworks, no dazzling lights, just a small wooden stage in a park where one could hear both the wind and the heart. Elias squeezed her hand tightly after the award. "Now you're building what people once called just a touching story." Amara smiled. "We're not building sentiment, we're building a place to stand." Lydia stepped up, representing the women once helped, and gave Amara a hand-embroidered shawl. It read, "The one who helped others find their voice." Amara wrapped the shawl around her shoulders and looked around. For the first time, she no longer felt like she had overcome. She was now leading the way. One late afternoon, while the Voice House prepared for its first rehearsal at the new location, Naya tugged Amara's hand out to the backyard. "Mom, can I be a painter? And also a singer?" Amara knelt, hugging her tightly. "You don't have to choose. You can be everything you want to be." The words caught in her own throat. For years, Amara believed she had to choose between surviving and dreaming. Now she didn't just dream, she lived fully in it. That evening, the rehearsal unfolded under soft lights. A little girl sang Amara's first lullaby, in her own way. Amara stood in the wings. She didn't step out. She knew this stage no longer belonged to her alone, and that was true success. One morning, Amara received a letter from the attorney's office. The DNA results Grayson had once requested unilaterally. She opened the envelope and read slowly. Grayson was not the biological father of Malik and Naya. Her heart stilled. Not from shock, but because the unexpected clarity lifted a weight she hadn't realized was still pressing down. She remembered. That night, after Grayson walked out, she had stayed with an old friend. The only one who held her through this breakdown without asking questions. A man who never returned, but also never took anything away. She set the letter down. No tears. For the first time, the past stopped demanding choices. She was free. Not just from Grayson, but from everything that had once bound her. That night, Amara sat with Lydia on the porch. She handed her the DNA results. The older woman wasn't surprised. "I always knew," Lydia said softly. "Not by logic, but by a mother's instinct, the kind that comes from being abandoned." Amara stayed quiet for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "I thought I'd feel betrayed, or hurt, but I don't." "Because truth doesn't hurt," Lydia replied. "It's the fear of truth that does." Amara folded the paper and placed it in a small box in the drawer, next to Grayson's mother's letter. She whispered, "My children don't need to know who gave them their blood. They only need to know who gave them her whole heart." And that heart had never backed down. Late one night, as Amara was cleaning the classroom, Elias walked in holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. He sat beside her in silence, then said, "I heard about the DNA test." Amara didn't look up. "I don't know what to say." Elias set the cup down. "You don't have to say anything. I'm still here. Not because I'm anyone's father, but because I want to walk beside you." Amara turned to him, meeting the quiet stillness in his eyes. No pressure, no demands, no explanations. I used to think no one could accept me. With such a complicated truth. Elias smiled gently. It's not about accepting. It's about choosing to stay. For the first time in years, Amara leaned on someone's shoulder. Not to be saved, but just to rest. On a Sunday morning, Elias and Amara took Naya and Malik to the park. Malik rode his bike. Nia brought her sketchbook. Elias sat with them, listening to every wild story about wind monsters and talking houses. Amara watched from a distance. No blood ties, no labels, just presence. Naya turned and asked, "Uncle Elias, are you our dad?" Elias smiled, glanced at Amara, and replied, "No, I'm not, but if you ever need someone to listen, to hold your hand, to protect you, I'll always be here." Malik nodded like he understood. Amara walked over and wrapped her arms around Elias. Family isn't what we have, it's what we build, together. Late one night, just as the voice house turned off its lights, Amara saw Grayson standing quietly by the gate. He said nothing, only handed her a letter. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, voice tired but honest. "Just a way to admit I was wrong." Amara didn't open the letter right there. She gave a small nod. "Thank you for finally saying it." Grayson looked around the building. His eyes landed on the sign at the entrance. "A voice once died, now lights the way for others." He murmured, "You did what I never had the courage to do." Amara replied, "Sometimes forgiveness doesn't begin with an apology. It begins when the one who was hurt no longer needs one." Then she walked in, steady, never looking back. Amara took Nia and Malik back to the old town, where she'd once been kicked out, once curled up in the snow with two newborns, this time not to confront, but to close the chapter. She brought them to this old library, the stone bench behind the church kitchen where she used to wait for a message that never came. Nia asked Aziz, "You used to live here, Mom?" "Yes," Amara said softly, "but I'm not that woman anymore." Malik pointed to the sky. "So today is the first time we've seen your hometown without sadness." Amara laughed and pulled them both into a tight hug. The past didn't disappear, but when you're strong enough, you can walk back into it, without trembling, without pain, and with nothing left to prove of it. After one of Amara's speeches went viral online, hundreds of emails poured into the Voice House. Women in prison, survivors of abuse, those who'd once lived on the streets. One wrote, "I never thought my voice mattered. Now I'm rewriting my life with the strength you passed on to me." Amara printed each letter and posted them on the hallway wall leading to the classroom. She named it, "The Wall of Those Who Began." A young woman from Louisiana traveled all the way just to say, "I once planned to end my life, but your video where you said you don't need forgiveness to move on saved me." Amara held her tightly, silently, not because there was nothing to say, but because the voices once buried were finally speaking on their own. The Voice House still opened each morning as usual. No cameras, no press, no big stages. Amara brewed tea, swept floors, adjusted each plastic chair in the classroom. Malik helped make name tags. Nia taped a handwritten note on the window. "Welcome. Here you are trusted." Elias installed new bookshelves. Lydia cooked her traditional bean soup for the afternoon session. An elderly woman walked in nervously, hands shaking. "I've never sung in front of anyone." Amara took her hand and led her to the small wooden platform. "Today is the first, and it's enough. No thunderous applause, just presence. Because sometimes miracles don't come from dazzling days, but from quiet ones where silence finally breaks." One evening, Amara sat down to write letters to Nia and Malik. Not a will, not instructions, but messages to their future selves. Two children she loved most in the world. "Someday you might feel lost," she wrote, "but remember your voice doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be true." She wrote about a night sleeping in a cold storage room, her first trembling performance, and the first time she didn't cry when left behind. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "If you ever forget how strong you are, read this, because I once forgot, but I relearned it, because of you." She placed the letter in a wooden box and locked it. One day, Nia and Malik would read it, and know they were born not of tragedy, but of resilience. One rainy afternoon, the Voice House lost power. No speakers, no lights, no projector. People began to cancel the open mic. But Amara stood, lit a small candle, and placed it at the center of the room. "We begin, like the first time," she said. The first person sang without accompaniment. Raw, shaky, but honest. Then another, then another. No auto-tune, no interruptions, just voices meeting one another in the dark. Nia and Malik sat in the circle of candlelight, eyes gleaming. Elias tapped rhythm on the table. Amara sang last. No climax, no spotlight, just a woman who once lost her voice, now offering it up to light others. On a quiet morning, as Amara wiped the tables, the door opened. A young woman stood with an old backpack, red-eyed. "I heard, this place is for people who don't know where to start," she whispered. Amara didn't ask her name, didn't ask why. She poured a cup of tea and pulled out a chair. "You're not late. You came the moment you were brave enough." The girl sat, hands trembling, eyes wet, but she stayed. By evening, at the end of the class, she stepped onto the platform and softly said, "I don't have a story yet, but today, I want to be heard." The room applauded, not because it was good, but because it was real. Amara nodded slowly. Because at the Voice House, no one has to be perfect. They just have to show up and be willing to go on. One day, Amara received an invitation to speak at an international conference on women and leadership. Lydia, Elias, and the students were excited, but Amara gently shook her head. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't need to. She chose to stay at the Voice House that day, sitting beside a woman fresh out of a shelter, listening to her fragmented story, a story no auditorium had ever made time for. "I don't need to stand on a big stage," Amara told Lydia. "I'm doing the most important work right here." Because some days you don't need to prove anything to the world. You just need to be present. For someone who still doesn't believe they're worth hearing. A little girl sat at the back of class, 8 years old. Her mother, a single mom, had just joined the writing group. The girl didn't speak much, just drew. Pictures of mouths, wide open, sealed shut, disappearing. Amara sat beside her and whispered, "Would you like to tell your story with colors?" The girl nodded. Amara taped her drawings to the wall outside the tea room. She wrote beneath them, "When you can't speak, you can draw, and when you're not ready to draw, you can sit beside someone who believes in you." That evening, the girl stepped onto the stage. She didn't sing, didn't speak, just held up a drawing. A room with a sign that read, "I want to be here." Amara wiped away tears, because the Voice House was never about teaching people to speak, but making sure no one stays silent alone. One late afternoon at year's end, Amara spotted Grayson in a small cafe. His face was tired, his eyes dull. He saw her, nodded, didn't approach, and she didn't stop walking. No disdain, no forgiveness, just a silent glance that said, "I passed you, and I no longer carry you with me." That evening at the Voice House, Amara sat with Nia and Malik writing gratitudes for the new year. Malik wrote, "I'm grateful Mom's home." Nia wrote, "I'm grateful Mom gives others a voice." Amara wrote just one line, "I'm grateful I didn't seek revenge through anger, but through freedom." And in that freedom, she returned voice to an entire generation. Amara stood before the door of the Voice House in the late afternoon light. Golden sunlight streamed through the windows, touching walls filled with artwork, notes, and fragments of memory from hundreds who once felt voiceless. Elias called out, "Ready?" She nodded. Inside, the 5th anniversary celebration was about to begin, but she paused, taking a few extra seconds to look once more at the sign on the door. "Where your voice begins is where someone else's is allowed to continue." Naya and Malik ran out, grabbing her hands. "Time to go on stage, Mom." Amara smiled, not for recognition, but because she knew. Whether she steps forward or steps back, she has left something that cannot be erased. A door always open for those who once believed they had no right to knock,